Late Rodney Carteret, Esquire, of somewhere in England, was roused from his semi-paralysis by a broad and bearded native who approached and, with a friendly grin, inclusive of both parties to the vis-a-vis, inquired, "Either of you Miss Cole for Boulder Brook?" "Both," said Darcy. "Wha?" barked the native. "That is, we are both going to Mr. Harmon's. Free bus to Boulder Brook," proclaimed the humorous native. "It's just as well there's two of you, though Mr. Tom didn't say nothing about more than one. You won't rattle so much when we hit the rocks." "I joined the party at the last moment," explained the impromptu bridegroom. "I'm for the bungalow." "You'll be there before you know it. 21 mile and 28 minutes, coming over in the old boat." Their cicerone led the way to the old boat. A large, battered, comfortably purring car tucked them in with many robes and applied himself to the wheel with an absorption which left them free to resume their own concerns. The surrounding mountains were in full panoply of their blazing October foliage, a scene to enthrall the dullest vision. Notwithstanding, Mr. Remsen's eyes kept straying from those splendors to the face of his companion. Attractive though this nearer view was, his own face wore the expression of one who painfully seeks the answer to an insoluble riddle. The girl answered his look with challenging mockery. "Don't overheat your poor brain about it," she implored. "Who called you Miss Cole?" said Remsen, with furrowed brows. "Why not, since it's my name?" "Cole! Cole!" ruminated her companion. "No. Positively, no." "Positively, yes. Do you think it's quite gallant in you to forget me entirely?" "First, you say I'm your husband," complained Remsen, "and now you claim acquaintance with me. It isn't fair. It muddles one's brain." "Look at me hard." "I've been doing that all day." "But it doesn't seem to have any result. Haven't you ever seen me before?" "Certainly." Darcy almost jumped. "Which time? I mean, where?" "On the northeast corner of 5th Avenue and 50th Street at 2:30 p.m. September 11th, returned the other, as one who recites a well-conned lesson. "You were looking up at an aeroplane and ran into me. You wore a black and white checkered suit and a most awfully smart little hat, and I stood there gawking after you until I was in danger of being arrested for obstructing the traffic." "Why?" "Frankly, because I hadn't seen anything quite like you since I landed, and I wanted to make the most of a poor opportunity." "Then why didn't you lift your hat politely and say, 'How do you do, Miss Cole?' like that?" "Because, by heavens," cried the badgered Remsen, "I don't know any Miss Cole." "Think again," adjured Darcy. "There was a blowy, windy day on a 5th Avenue coach when you got off to help a woman with a suitcase, full of burglar's tools or solid gold ingots, I don't know which. Never thought a suitcase could weigh so much." "Poor Mr. Remsen," laughed the girl, but her eyes were soft as she turned them to him. "You must have been terribly bored, but you were game. You didn't see me on the coach?" "I didn't notice anyone but the two working girls with the suitcase. Do you think I could have seen you and forgotten you?" "Be careful. You're only making it worse. One of the two working girls called after you to thank you, didn't she?" Remsen fell suddenly thoughtful. Now I recall, the voice did seem familiar, but surely, perhaps this will help. She hummed softly a passage of the lulling, lilting song which she had heard from his lips on that memorable day of her great resolve. "Wait!" he cried. "I'm getting it. Gloria Greene's studio. A girl asleep on the divan while I was playing. She corrected a change of chord for me. But you? Never tell me that was you." "Darcy Cole at your service." Well, well, but, stammered Remsen, for once in his life wholly confused and bewildered. What were you in disguise for? I wasn't. Then I must have been stone blind that day. You had no eyes at all, for me, said she, demurely. However, that's not to be wondered at. If it were, somebody else would have to do the wondering. My capacity in that direction is totally exhausted. Won't you please explain? With pleasure, if you'll tell me what. Miss Cole was enjoying herself greatly. What this transformation scene means. At the studio, you were, well, say it, she encouraged. I was an ugly little toad. Remsen made gestures and gurgles of violent protest. Not at all, but you were, well, quite different. Yes, I wasn't very well, nor very happy. Judging from appearances, you must be about the healthiest and happiest person in the world today, then, he retorted. Do you know, she reproved, that your compliments lack subtlety? That's easy, because I mean 'em. The native at the wheel made a quarter turn with his head, extended his mouth to a point east by north of his right ear, and from the corner of it shouted, Set tight! Here's where she gets kinder streaky. Thereupon, as at a signal call, the car gathered itself together and proceeded to emulate the chamois of the Alps. For several frantic leaps and jounces, the couple in the back seat preserved the conventionalities. Then came a stretch where an ancient, humpbacked vein of granite had thrust itself up through the road surface, and all decorum was flung to the winds. Miss Cole crossed the car in 2 bunny jumps and fell upon Mr. Remsen's neck, thrusting his head against the side curtain with such force as to form a bulge, which several outreaching trees playfully poked with their branches. As further evidence of her affection, she stuck her elbow in his eye, after which she coyly retreated into her own corner by the aerial route. Mr. Remsen assisted her flight by a method known in football as giving the shoulder. He then rose to explain, settled squarely upon both her feet, and concluded the performance by seating himself on her knees and browsing a mouthful from the veil which was twisted about her hat. Taking advantage of a precious but fleeting moment when the car soared like a gull across the bay of mud, they both addressed the chauffeur. Stop! Shrieked Miss Cole. Schlumph! Vociferated Mr. Remsen, meaning the same thing, but the veil had become involved with his utterance. The native brought his boat to a halt, just short of a ghastly blind turn, screened by a wooded cliff. "'Smatter?" he inquired. "You're shaking us to bits," protested Darcy. "Please don't go so fast." "Shucks," said the other. "Call that fast? I could do better with a hearse." "Very likely," returned Remsen. "The passenger in a hearse hasn't anything to say about how he travels. We have. Ease it up." What retort the native might have found was cut off by a persistent trumpeting from around the curve. Honk, honk, brr, brr. Honk, 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 brr, brr, brr. "2 cars," interrupted the native. "Bellering for help, I wouldn't wonder. Probably bogged down in that mud waller at the foot of the hill. One of 'em sounds like our truck." Again, the brazen voice of warning and appeal thrilled through the air. "'Tis our truck," confirmed the chauffeur. "I know the old cow's voice. I presume that couple for the boss's cottage is getting a taste of real country life in the rodent line." "What couple?" asked Darcy, sitting up. "Young married pair. Got off the train at Meredith." "At Meredith?" repeated Darcy in troubled tones. "There's another couple due from Ashland for the island. All friends of the boss's. Like's not, that's the other car that's whooping it up down there at the foot of the hill. Quite a party." The gleam of a horrid surmise shone in the look which Darcy turned upon Remsen. you suppose it could be they? Oh, it couldn't. I am very much afraid it is. Oh, that would be too awful. Don't let it be Maud.